Without the ones like you, who work tirelessly to keep things running, everything would suddenly stop. Hospitals, factories, schools, and power plants, they all depend on you. No matter the weather, emergency, or time of day, you're the ones who get it done. At Grainger, we're here for you with professional-grade industrial supplies. Count on real-time product availability and fast delivery. Call, clickgrainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hello, and welcome back to the Curious Kid Podcast. This is episode 210 of Curious Kid Podcast, but something is happening for the first time in the history of the podcast today. If you are listening to this episode on release day, which is October 9th, it's Olivia's birthday. Happy 9th birthday, Olivia!
Thank you so much, Daddy. We started recording this podcast when I was only 4 years old, and we've released an episode every single Sunday since the beginning. But this is the first time an episode being released on my birthday, which is awesome.
It's totally awesome. One of the things that is so interesting about hosting this podcast is that we have lots of listeners that don't know what we look like. I listen to about 20 different podcasts on some of my favorite topics, like history, music, and sports, and I don't know what most of the podcasters I listen to look like. Olivia is a beautiful girl. If there is one physical feature that people would quickly notice that Olivia and I share, it's freckles. Lots and lots of freckles. Since I was a little child, I've always been fascinated by freckles and other skin features that help make us all unique.
Double mailbag!
Double mailbag! Dear Jacob and Olivia, hello! Our names are Bennett, Blake, and Bryson from Kingston, New Hampshire, and we are 5-year-old triplet brothers. We listen to Curious Kid Podcast whenever we go for long drives in the car with our dad. We really enjoyed podcast number 65 about twins. We also enjoy your podcasts about the human body. Something we would love to learn more about is freckles and moles. We think it's an interesting topic because it's something that makes us unique. Hello from Dallas, Texas. My children, William, age 6, and Ellie, age 4, love to listen to your podcast. We've learned so many interesting things. We are curious about birthmarks. Thanks so much for making our car rides more enjoyable. Keep up the good work. Best wishes from the Lone Star State.
Those were some awesome messages we received from our listeners on Facebook. We can't wait to learn more about freckles, birthmarks, and moles for Bennett, Blake, Bryson, William, and Ellie.
I'm super excited for this episode, not only because the topic is super interesting, but also because we are going to be joined by a very special guest in just a few minutes.
Our special guest is a dermatologist, which is a doctor who treats lots of different conditions involving the skin, hair, and nails. There are thousands of different conditions that dermatologists treat, and we can't wait to learn more about freckles, birthmarks, and moles from our guest dermatologist.
She is going to help us learn so much more about this week's topic, and she's also going to answer the question of the week.
The question of the week is, can somebody with freckles get more or less freckles as they get older?
While you're thinking about the answer, let's start learning about freckles first.
Freckles are parts of the skin that have more of a pigment called melanin than the surrounding area. That leads to a part of the skin that is different color than the area around it. Most freckles are considered to be simple freckles, which are small and usually harmless. They often appear on parts of the body that get lots of exposure to the sun. That's why you usually find simple freckles on the face and the arms.
Even though simple freckles can come in a bunch of different colors, including black, brown, red, and yellow, an individual person usually has only one freckle color.
Simple freckles will also get darker in the summer months, with more exposure to the sun.
People with light skin, like the two of us, and light hair, are more likely to have freckles than people with darker skin.
Although freckles would not be found on newborn babies, they can appear on kids as young as 1 or 2 years old.
There is another type of freckle that is a bit different from simple freckles. They are often referred to as sunburn freckles.
Unlike simple freckles, sunburn freckles usually appear on the back and shoulders. They are also usually bigger than simple freckles. They also don't get lighter in the winter, like simple freckles tend to do.
Now that we've learned a bit about freckles, let's learn what birthmarks are and how they differ from freckles.
Birthmarks are marks on the skin that usually appear from birth, which is why they are called birthmarks. Unlike freckles, which are flat, birthmarks can be flat or raised, and they come in lots of different colors, sometimes even pink or purple. Birthmarks can be small, like the size of a pea, or they can be much larger too.
Like freckles, birthmarks are usually harmless. They might even go away or get smaller over time.
There are 2 basic types of birthmarks that occur for different reasons. They are called pigmented birthmarks and vascular birthmarks.
Pigmented birthmarks appear because there are more cells that create pigment in a particular area of the skin. Vascular birthmarks occur when there are too many blood vessels in an area or the blood vessels are wider than usual.
There are lots of opinions on what birthmarks might mean. Some people believe that birthmarks are good luck, while others believe that birthmarks mean that the person is possessed by demons. The reason for all these theories is that scientists aren't really certain what causes birthmarks, leaving people to come up with their own explanations.
One more skin feature to learn about before you interview a dermatologist. Let's talk about moles.
The word mole is Latin, and it means spot. There are 3 different types of moles.
That's right. Congenital moles are moles that babies are born with. About 1 out of every 100 babies born will have congenital moles. They come in lots of different colors and sizes, and they never go away.
Acquired moles are moles that don't appear till later. They are usually very small, measuring less than a 1/4 inch. They are also commonly brown. It is believed that these moles might be a sign of skin damage caused by the sun.
Finally, there are atypical moles. They are bigger than other moles, and many atypical moles aren't brown. Atypical moles might even impact the color of surrounding skin as well.
Many moles start off resembling freckles, and then they can change in color, shape, and size over time. They are more common in fair-skinned people.
We've learned a lot about freckles, birthmarks, and moles, but we are super lucky to have a dermatologist join us to answer a few questions. Dr. Okon is a board-certified dermatologist who practices a combination of general and surgical dermatology for both kids and adults in a private practice in Voorhees, New Jersey. Take it away, Olivia.
Dr. Okon, thank you so much for joining us on Curious Kid Podcast. I'm so excited to have the chance to ask you some questions. The question of the week is, can someone with freckles get more or less freckles as they get older?
That's a great question, Olivia. So you may notice that the more you go in the sun as someone who gets freckles, the more you get. You may notice that every winter they fade, but then every summer there they are on your nose and cheeks. A freckle is actually your body putting up this tiny shield to try to protect you from the sun, which sounds great, except it doesn't work so well. And eventually you sunburn. Just like you, Olivia, I had tons of freckles on my face as a kid. I used to try to count them, but I always gave up because I had so many. Sometimes when I tell people I was a freckly kid, they seem surprised because I really don't have nearly as many freckles now as an adult. And that's because as you get older, you tend to get less of these simple freckles and more what are called solar lentigines, which are sunspots. And those are those tiny brown spots that are a little bigger than freckles that you may see on your parents and grandparents. Solar lentigines are a sign of sun damage to the skin over the years. Now, that doesn't mean we should be afraid of the sun. Lots of fun stuff happens out in the sun, like swimming, going to the beach, or playing with your friends on a playground. But it's so important to practice healthy sun protective habits, such as wearing hats, swim shirts, seeking shade when you can, and wearing sunscreen. I recommend to apply at least SPF 30 and keep putting it on every 2 hours, even if you really don't want to take a break from building that sandcastle.
Are birthmarks, freckles, and moles hereditary?
So freckles are hereditary because skin type tends to run in families, and this depends upon a gene that your parents pass down to you. This gene determines the kind of melanin your melanocytes, which are your pigment-producing cells, make. If you're someone who has dark hair, eyes, and skin, you may not freckle at all and you may tan, just like one or both of your parents. On the other hand, if you have red, blonde, or light brown hair with light skin and eyes, you may get lots of freckles, like me and you, Olivia. Now, moles can be both hereditary and non-hereditary because they can come along with skin type. So you may notice you have a similar type or amount of moles as other family members. Acquired moles are more related to sun exposure and less from your genes. There are many types of birthmarks, but in general, they're less likely to be genetic or passed down from your parents and more likely to be sporadic, which are random events that occur during neonatal development. A common type of vascular birthmark known as a stork bite, which is a really cute nickname for a red patch on the back of the neck, is seen in half of all babies. Now, sometimes stork bites will fade, but I see grown-ups in the clinic all the time that have no idea that they even have one when I mention it because their hair's been covering it for years. Go peek on the back of your siblings' or parents' hairlines and see if they have one. You may surprise them.
How do you know when you need to see a dermatologist regarding your birthmarks, freckles, or moles?
Now, that's a super important question, Olivia. So it's perfectly normal to get new freckles and moles over time, even as a grown-up. It also can be normal for your moles to change a little bit over time, or as we say, it's normal for a mole to grow with you. It's sort of like as your body stretches and grows, the spots on your skin, of course they stretch and grow too. That's normal. Sometimes moles or birthmarks might be flat or smooth when you're little and more bumpy and sticking out as you get older, and that can be very normal. Spots on your skin, whether they are birthmarks, freckles, or moles, shouldn't change in any major way in a short period of time. It would be a good idea to see a dermatologist if a mole doubles or triples in size in a few months to make sure it's healthy. Melanoma is a type of skin cancer that can be very dangerous, but if caught early, people can do very well with treatment. We talk about the A, B, C, D, E's of melanoma, which is a way for you to remember what to look out for when you're looking at spots on your skin or the skin of your parents or grandparents. A stands for asymmetry, which means if you draw a line down the center of a spot, the two halves should be pretty much the same. B stands for borders, which means the edges of a mole should be smooth and not jagged like Cookie Monster took a bite out of it. C stands for color, which reminds us that a given mole should be just one color and not black on one side and tan on the other. D stands for diameter, which refers to size, and then a mole over 6 millimeters or bigger than the size of a pencil eraser might be concerning unless it's always been that way. And finally, E stands for evolution, which is that change over time. A little bit, fine, but a big change in a short period of time is a good reason to get a mole checked out by an expert. Another reason to see a dermatologist for a spot on the skin is if that spot is just bugging you, like it's itching, bleeding, or hurting. Sometimes this can be a sign of an unhealthy spot on the skin that your dermatologist might want to remove. And sometimes you might just want it removed because it's driving you nuts, like rubbing on your necklaces or you're hitting it every time you brush your hair. If you notice a spot has some or many of these features, that's when you come to see a dermatologist like me. And it's my job to figure out what spots are healthy and what spots need to be removed to keep you safe.
Wow, that was an amazing interview. A big thanks to Dr. Okon for taking the time to answer a few questions for us.
Thank you, Dr. Okon, for giving us the skinny on freckles, birthmarks, and moles.
Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's podcast, number 210, on freckles, birthmarks, and moles.
Great job, Olivia, and great job, Bennett, Blake, Bryson, William, and Ellie for an episode topic suggestion that definitely reminds us to love the skin we're in. Before we wrap this episode up, we have some awesome people to thank.
Thank you to our newest Patreon supporters, Stepan A and Dylan A.
A big thanks to Stepan and Dylan for the support. Next week, we will get curious about numbers and math for listeners in Massachusetts, Maryland, California, Florida, and Utah. As always, thank you so much for listening and getting curious with us.
Without the ones like you, who work tirelessly to keep things running, everything would suddenly stop. Hospitals, factories, schools, and power plants, they all depend on you. No matter the weather, emergency, or time of day, you're the ones who get it done. At Grainger, we're here for you with professional-grade industrial supplies. Count on real-time product availability and fast delivery. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.